Every one of us have probably heard this little question. It's really kind of a joke, but anyway, I'm going to ask it anyway, even if you know it. Pete and Repeat were sitting on a log. Pete fell off, and who was left? Pete and Repeat were sitting on a log. Pete fell off, and who was left? Now, see, you can just keep on going with that forever, can't you? Forever. The reason I say that is because it's funny. When we talk about education, they say that there's 3 laws of education. Does anybody know what they are? Yes, repeat, repeat, repeat. But if a preacher has a little bit of repetition about him, the church goes crazy. You know that? He just keeps repeating this stuff all the time. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because the 3 laws of learning. Repeat, repeat, repeat. We want you to learn this stuff, right? And you know what's crazy? I can repeat it. Y'all come back the next Sunday and you still forgot it. Okay? Just messing with you. We're in a study of a judge by the name of Gideon. He is the, what number judge? 5th judge. Yes, the 5th judge of Israel. And who is he, or who has he been commanded to redeem Israel from? Yes, the Midianites. And they've been in oppression how long? Ooh, finally got you. If I ask enough questions. Okay, 7 years. 7 years they had been in oppression. Okay, and Gideon has started the battle. Is the battle going well? Oh yes, the battle's going well. He only had how many men? 300 initially. Okay, 300 initially, and they surprised attacked the Midianites, and the Midianites were put into flight, and he caused the other tribes to come in and join in the battle, and they do. And then there's one that initially was not asked to come in, but he finally asked them to come to the battle. Who is it? Ephraim, yes. Now, who is this Ephraim? Okay, number 1, Ephraim was a brother of Manasseh. Now that's important because Gideon was from the tribe of Manasseh. So the Ephraimites would have been a distant cousin, distant relative to Gideon. And, you know, most of the time relatives like to be included in things that relatives do, right? But Gideon didn't initially ask Ephraim to the battle, did he? Okay? It was after the battle had started. It was after the Midianites had begun to flee from the battle that he calls on Midian. And what did he ask them to do? Yes, he said, I want you to stop them at the water, right? Stop them before they get at Bethbara. Stop them before they can cross the Jordan River. Because if they ever cross the river, this whole battle could change pretty quickly, couldn't it? Okay? They could escape, or they could get across the river and they could regroup and come back and fight us again. True or false? Ephraim refused to join in the battle. False. They joined in the battle. They stopped them at the rivers, didn't they? And in the process, they caught somebody. Who'd they catch? 2 princes, right? Oreb and Zeb. Your children or grandchildren's next names. Okay. Oreb means what? See, that was just a little thing I threw in last time. Raven. And Zeb means wolf. Now see, doesn't that make it sound better? Who are you? I'm Raven. Okay. Who are you? I'm wolf. You see, that makes it sound a lot better, right? And did they allow these 2 men to live? No, they put them to death. And not only did they put them to death, they also did what to them? Oh yes, cut off their head. Okay, kids like to say it, they chopped off their head. Okay, and who did they take those heads to? They took those 2 heads to Gideon and presented them to him. They did you. You know, we can just see them dripping necks hanging down, and you know, just here we got them. Look here, look what we got, Gideon. What would that do? It would confirm the death of the 2 men, right? And what else would it do? Hopefully help to strengthen and give Israel a little bit more energy to fight the battle, wasn't it? Here's two key commanders of the armies of Midian, and now they've been put to death. And so everything seems like it's going along perfectly, doesn't it? Sort of, kind of, but not really. Notice point D in the outline, in the introduction. When Ephraim brought the heads of Orb and Zeb to Gideon, they had a bone to pick with their leader, didn't they? In this chapter, beginning in chapter 8, verses 1 through 3, we're going to read about the protest of Ephraim. The protest of Ephraim. Notice it begins, number 1, with the... Notice Ephraim remonstrates. Boy, that's a big word, isn't it? Remonstrates with Gideon, the confrontation. And the men of Ephraim said unto him, why hast thou served us thus, that thou callest us not when thou wentest to fight with the Midianites? Remember my opening statement in the lesson this morning? Sometimes life involves difficult conversations with different individuals, doesn't it? Okay? And here, that's what we have, right? We have a difficult conversation that's got to transpire, or that's going to transpire. Ephraim wanted to know, why in the world did you not initially call us to the battle? Why have you waited so long to bring us into this process? Wow. Notice 3 points. They were Gideon's brethren, right? Folks, you know, you're just supposed to treat kinfolk a certain way, right? Now, you can treat others any way you want to. But kinfolk, you're just supposed to treat them good. And Gideon feels like they've been what? Slighted as kinfolks, don't they? Remember, too, we said that Ephraim was what? Not only kin, it was the largest tribe of all the northern kingdom. Okay, folks, the largest tribe. Okay, so it was comparable to which other tribe? Judah. These are the two top tribes. Okay, and so here Ephraim is. He's kin. He's a huge tribe. He's the biggest tribe. And if you've got the biggest tribe, do you think you probably have the most fighting men? Yeah. Now, doesn't it just make sense that Gideon should have called these men to the battle? We're kin to you. We're the biggest tribe. We got the biggest fighting force of all the tribes of Israel. And you didn't call us. Man. Nobody ever felt that way, right? Notice 2 questions that came to my mind. Why didn't Gideon call Ephraim? Okay? Now this is where we have turned the attention and the focus upon whom? Upon leadership, right? Leadership. We'll come back in just a minute to another focus. Notice this question springs from common sense and common courtesy. As kinsmen, surely they would have been notified of the battle. Now note, they were eventually called to do what? They were called to fight, weren't they? They were eventually called, but their question is not that. Their question is, why weren't we called when? At the start. Now notice the question that I there. Can leaders make mistakes by not considering everyone who can be of assistance to a program of work? You see, this is the focus on who? This is the focus on leadership. Okay? When leadership makes decisions, do they not need to stop and do they not need to consider as many individuals as they possibly can? Here's what's sad about leaders sometimes. Leaders make decisions based on what affects them. If it affects them, they make a decision. If it affects somebody else, guess what? They can just blow it off. Piddly little thing. Boy, the very minute it affects their lives, right? And that's kind of the way it is with nations' leaders sometimes, right? You know, folks, if you're wealthy, right? And if you got all the money in the world, you got 3 or 4 or 5 houses, You get transported everywhere. All your food is provided. Does a little inflation bother you? It don't bother you. But you know, when you're the little folk, right? And you go down here and you're buying groceries and your grocery bill is $50, $60 a week higher than it used to be, that bothers you, doesn't it? And you get a little bit upset when individuals look at you and say, suck it up. Suck it up. I done sucked up everything I got. Okay? You know, and doesn't it get frustrating as followers when that's the attitude of the leaders? Sure it does. Okay? Leaders have to be very careful. They've got people under them, and those people are impacted, they are affected, and they need to realize how my decisions can impact somebody else. And Ephraim feels, perhaps Gideon did not take into account their feelings. Okay? How? Well, the only thing that we know as far as God's actual involvement, okay, was that He reduced the troops initially to how many? 300. And it appears as though He gave Gideon part of the decision-making process. It was Gideon who divided them up into 3 groups. Okay, we don't know how many in each group, but he divided them into 3 groups. Gideon, as a leader, still had a responsibility in the battle. And he still had obligations in the battle. God works with people to accomplish victories, doesn't He? Okay, and so all we know is that it was God who reduced their number initially so that they couldn't say what? We won this battle all by ourselves. God wasn't involved. No, God was heavily involved, wasn't He? Okay, Larry?
Sometimes the followers do not know everything that the leaders know.
This is true.
There may be things that they don't need to know.
This is true.
As you were referring to in your sermon this morning. Sometimes elders are aware of problems or things that it's not the best for the congregation to know that. As an elder, my wife gets on me all the time when I go to an elder's meeting, and she says, "What happened?" I said, "Well, we had a meeting." And she said, "It's almost as if she thinks I don't trust her." It's not trust at all.
Not at all.
There's some things that she doesn't need to do. It's just like you said in that lesson. Sometimes we have members that are I call them bureaus of information. Because they know everything about everybody, and if they don't know it, they'll dig for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes Emily will get a phone call, and I can tell from the conversation somebody's digging.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I don't tell her, because she can say, "I don't know."
Yeah, see, one of my first works that I was ever in, this elder's wife, she would call Kathleen trying to dig up information. And Kathleen, finally, she just told her one day, she says, "Look, it's none of my business. I don't know most of this stuff. I don't want to know this stuff, and don't call me." Well, needless to say, that friendship didn't go over too good. But needless to say, she never called back again asking for information. Folks, we don't need tidbits, do we? It's not ours to know. Now see, I can take Larry's statement one of 2 ways, can I? If I'm a teacher, I can take it one of 2 ways, right? Here's the first way. He's an elder, right? We've been talking about leaders taking into account all the people, right? He's a hit dog that started barking. See? And I think this is why we don't do that. Okay. But I could take it another way and lead into the second section. Notice the second point there. Why was there any obligation on Gideon's part to call Ephraim? Right? Why? Who's the leader? Gideon. He's the captain of the forces. Folks, it is his job to do what? make decisions. That's his job. Unbelievable. Aren't leaders free to make decisions they feel that are the best for the battle? Sure. Ephraim's pride seems to be hurt, doesn't it? That's the point. Now note the next statement I put down there. Could their pride have been one of the reasons Gideon didn't call them? You know, there's some people who just love to be out in front, don't they? And when the battle is won, they love all the glory and all the prestige, and they want their name up in spotlights, don't they? As if they've done something big. And maybe it's that very reason. Gideon said, you know, let's leave Ephraim out for right now. When we need them, we'll what? We'll give them a buzz, okay? Now notice the third point. Could Gideon have reasoned that, you know, I may need these people later in battle? And they may be valuable to me when the rest of the troops are struggling because of the initial conflict, and I can call them and they'll come to our aid because they are my what? My brethren. See, we don't know what's going on in the mind of Gideon. But notice the question, folks. Leaders are given the freedom of choice when they make their plans. Sometimes the plans they make could leave someone out for a period of time. Followers need to do what? Accept the decision of the leadership. That's our responsibility. Okay? Sometimes we just need to accept their wisdom. That's why they're what? That's why they're there. Okay? Now, we hate that in the church. Right? We hate that in the church. But as parents, we ain't got no problem with that. Right? We look at those kids and we tell them, you're on a need-to-know basis. And there ain't no need for you to know. And we just walk off and let the kid cry. Right? But if we do that in the church, oh man, we got the worst elders and leaders in the world. They just won't tell us anything. Those are sometimes leaders just have to make decisions. And they do the best they can do with the information they have. And they're what? They're human beings, aren't they? They're human beings.
And they'll give an account.
Oh, yes, they will. Account to the head bishop. That's exactly right. Bev? Well, it's okay if you're asking out of concern for somebody to help and assist. Okay? But see, that's not the stuff we like. You know? Oh, all you had to do is ask them. I did too. I asked them. Y'all going, no, hallelujah. Oh, yes. Yeah, I mean, there's things that we need to know, okay? And most of the time, if someone's sick, if something's up in their life, they volunteer that information. I don't have to go searching for it like crazy. Now, occasionally I might have to, okay? But most of the time, information about sick, people that are struggling in sin, people who aren't here, folks, they're the ones who give you the indication, are they not? Why aren't you here? You know, if you don't want me to ask questions, be here. You know, that's the way it is. If you don't want me to ask questions, then that's the best way to do it, right? She was here. Oh, okay, I don't have to call her.
One area that this shows up sometimes, maybe you don't follow it equally as good, is when somebody comes forward to make a member makes a confession.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it says confess your sin. Sometimes we simply say, oh, well, I have sinned. But 9 times out of 10, they're going to be one or more members are going to say, well, what did he do? Why is he confessing? They're just some things that we don't need.
This is so true. So true. I'm not going to go there. I got an application of that, but I'm not going to go there. Notice the next point, okay? No. Get me in bad trouble. We'll just go on. And they did chide with him how? Sharply, folks. That little word chide means to toss, grapple, wrangle, hold a controversy, to strive, to contend, to make a complaint, to quarrel, to contend against. Strong says it means vehemence. Brown Driver and Briggs says that sharply means force, might, strength. Had we been there that day and had we heard the conversation that was transpiring, folks, we may have gotten a little uncomfortable. You know what? They didn't just chide with him. They didn't just ask him a question. The Bible says they chided what? Sharply with him. These folks were angry and they were upset, and there was vehemence on their part as far as what they felt Gideon had done to them. Okay? Notice point number 3. There may have been many reasons Ephraim was so antagonistic. Number 1, we already talked about it, wounded pride. Right? Wounded pride. Number 2, heightened emotions. Right? Especially the emotion of what? Anger. Folks, if you ever get angry, calm down before you what? Deal with it. Right? Just calm down a little bit. Take some breaths. Just chill out. Because if you don't, you may get into a confrontation that is ugly. And this one was beginning to turn ugly on the part of who? On the part of Ephraim, was it not? They chided sharply with him. Maybe they even had a dislike for who? Gideon. You know? Not everybody likes Victor Eskew. Okay? I know that amazes most of you. I'm just kidding. Okay? But you know, there's times when people in churches and other they get it against their elders. You know, I don't like him. You know, and they never like him. They don't care. It don't matter what he does, what he says, how he acts, how he treats them. I don't like him. You know, and then when they have to interact with that individual, can you tell they don't like him? Yes. You know, it's short, sharp, right? Always looking for faults and problems and difficulties. You know, maybe Ephraim didn't like their brother, Gideon, as a leader. Jim? There you go. Except at this point now, they'd already been invited to the battle, hadn't they? Okay, I mean, they'd already won a major victory in this battle. It may have just been even disappointment, mightn't it? You know, you should have asked, right? And can disappointment make us sometimes approach things in an incorrect way? Yeah, I mean, we're not told why they were so bent out of shape, but folks, they were upset and they chided sharply with him. Notice the lessons there. It's easy for situations that were never intended to hurt or slight anyone to become highly charged. Words can be said and actions taken that can do much harm to relationships. What if Gideon never intended to slight these people? What if in his mind he had always included them in the battle? And he says, you know, when the battle gets to this point, I'll call Gideon. Knowing that they would come to his aid. Okay? We don't know that, do we? So he may have never intended to slight them at all. And even if we are sometimes slighted, don't we have to deal with that without just getting all bent out of shape? We need to be able to do that. Notice point B, leaders have to be extremely cautious when they handle these situations. They made the decisions, didn't he? They make the decisions. Folks, when you make a decision, guess what? Sometimes we have to live with the consequences of that decision. You make the decision, you offend somebody, you slight somebody, guess what? You've got to live with that decision, don't you? You got to live with their being upset with you because you didn't include them in the process. Regardless, people have been wounded. How they respond can make or break the situation. And when I say they, I'm talking about leaders. Okay? Folks, leaders have a greater responsibility than the followers do. Or they wouldn't be what? They wouldn't be leaders. Okay? That's the reason for the qualifications of elders, is it not? One of them is this, not self-willed. It ain't about me, it's about who? It's about the church. That's who it's about, not me. Not self-willed. Here's another qualification of elder. Not soon angry. You see, you can have somebody standing in your face, spitting and slobbering all over you, and guess what you're not supposed to do? You're not supposed to get soon angry. They're supposed to keep their composure. They're supposed to be what they're supposed to be as shepherds of the flock. Here we got a man, a leader, Gideon. And guess what? He's probably got more than one individual in his face, doesn't he? Chiding him sharply. Why didn't you invite us to the battle? Why didn't you call us first? Why have you invited these other tribes and not us, your own brethren? Oh, man. How Gideon responds to this is important, isn't it? Notice Gideon's response to Ephraim. And he said unto them, what have I done now in comparison of you? Did he answer their question? No. And guess what? He never does. Their answer was what? Their question was, why? He never answers the question. Ever answers the question. Okay? What he does is he stops them right in the middle of their yelling and screaming and hollering and being belligerent. And he focuses them on what? He focuses them on the battle and what's been done and their contribution to the battle, doesn't he? And he just asks them, what have I done in comparison to you? Wow. The lessons. This often happens when individuals get angry. They can only see one thing, can't they? Folks, you've got to get them out of tunnel vision. And you've got to get them to do what? See the big picture. Okay? All they see is, you didn't include me. You know? It's so fun. I think I may have told you this. My son, he was working as a manager of Sonic, and this kid came to him. He was all upset. You don't give me enough hours. I need some more hours. You know? And my son looked on the schedule. He says, well, you know what? He said, I got a shift this afternoon. You get 6 hours. Well, I don't want to do it today. You know? He's all focused on not getting hours. Now he opened himself up to the big picture, and guess what? He don't want it. You know? Get out of my face. Go home. Okay? Unbelievable. Notice point B, most of the time anger fails to think. If we are confronted by a person who is angry, one of the first things we have to do is get them to stop and what? Think. Anger just talks. Anger just acts, doesn't it? And folks, we've got to stop. And we've got to get that person to think. And that's exactly what Gideon is doing, isn't it? Even if they ask, what do you mean by that? He's at least getting them to what? Stop and think. What have I done in comparison to you? What are you talking about, Gideon? Now you're comparing what? Us with who? Us with him. He's the leader, and now he's telling them that they've done more than he's done. As the leader, does that make you stop and think? Absolutely, it makes you stop and think. Notice the comparison made. Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? Wow. Let's start with the two names, right? Ephraim and who? Abiezer. We know who Ephraim is. We've already talked about them. In times past, we've talked about Abiezer. Who is that? That is Gideon's immediate family. Okay? He's from the Abiezer clan or family, who is also of the tribe of Manasseh. Okay? Now notice what he says. Is not the gleaning of Ephraim versus the vintage of who? Abiezer. Okay? Now folks, the gleaning. Okay? If I were to ask you to go out into a vineyard and glean the grapes, guess what that doesn't mean? Now see, I didn't say what it does mean. Okay? It doesn't mean to go out there and harvest all the grapes. That's not what gleaning is about. Gleaning is when you go out and guess what you do? You find the good stuff. Okay? You look on this one, you get the good stuff. You go here and get this one and get the good stuff. You go over here and get the good stuff. But you don't glean the whole thing. But guess what the vintage is? The vintage is what? The whole harvest. Okay? So here's what he's saying. He says, isn't the gleaning of Ephraim? You're going out and you've gotten, yes, the smaller things, the little things, but guess what? They're the valuable things. They are the best of the things that are in the vineyard. And even though we've gathered the whole vineyard in, as the Abbot writes, guess what? Your gleanings are better than what? Than everything we've done so far. Do you think that Ephraim had ever considered that? I bet they hadn't even considered that. You know, all they knew is what? We weren't invited. And now the commander is saying, you've done more than my whole family's done. My close immediate family. He didn't include Manasseh. He just said what? The Abbot writes. Unbelievable. In some way, what Ephraim had reaped in the gleaning process was far greater than the entire vintage, the victory over Midian that Gideon had acquired. Notice he goes on to explain what he's talking about. God hath delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. And what was I able to do in comparison to you? See, up to this point, Gideon hadn't caught any commanders, had he? We weren't told of any. All he had done is put Midian to what? Put Midian to flight. But now, here's Ephraim comes along. Not only do they stop them at the water, they grab two of their princes and put them to death. I haven't been able to do that yet, Gideon says. What you've done by doing this is so much more beneficial than what I've done so far in this entire battle. Wow. You see, you got to do what? You got to open up people's eyes to what's really going on, folks. Okay? That's not easy to do, is it? When people are confronting us, when people are angry, and they get upset, and they're spitting out of all this junk to you, all you want to do is what? Blow up in their face, don't you? Be thankful you're here. Be thankful I even called you in the first place. Wish I hadn't now. Oh, that'd have been bad, wouldn't it? That ain't the way to do that. It could have been, and we talked about this, the Bible doesn't say this, it could have been that Oreb and Zeb were two of the most prominent warriors in the Midianite army. Okay? And it may have been that they were the ones who were leading the most powerful and the most strategic forces that Midian had. And now what? They're gone. Right? Folks, you kill two key leaders in battle, can that radically alter the battle? Yes. And that's exactly what Midian had done. And Gideon, well, let me ask you this. Do you think Gideon lied to them? Okay? Got a bunch of no's. Okay, redirected their thinking. He did do that. So let me ask you this. Why don't you think Gideon was lying to them? Why don't you think that? You said you don't think that. So why don't you think that? Because if he had been lying, they would have known it. Wouldn't they? You know, folks, if somebody's just playing you for a fool, right? If this kind of a statement were just made in jest, oh, Ephraim, don't you know you've done a whole lot more than I have? And all they'd done was glued on a sticker somewhere? You know, are you kidding me? No, now that Ephraim has stopped and looked at it, they understand that Gideon's telling them what? He's telling the absolute truth. What we have done in this battle is unbelievable. And we have done marvelous things. And how do we know that? Notice the response of Ephraim. And their anger was abated toward him when he had said that. Notice those points, folks. He was not just stroking their ego. If he had been exaggerating the situation, they would have known it. His words would not have what? Pacified them. They would have still been angry. But the Bible says what? Their anger was abated. Wow. Is this the way a leader is supposed to act? Is this what a leader is supposed to do? Yeah, folks. You know, it's wonderful that we can go into the Bible, hear these old stories, and yet they sound like what? Just like today, don't they? Because human nature and the way people behave doesn't change, does it? Okay? And so that's why we go into the Scripture and we learn these stories so that we do come to understand it. Notice that little word abated means slackened, to sink, to relax, to abate, to withdraw. They were no longer what? Angry. Wow. 2 questions, right? What have I done in comparison to thee? Is not the gleaning of Ephraim far better than what? The vintage of the Abiezrites? 2 questions. Psst. I don't know about you. If I'm a leader, I go, whew. Whew, I said the right thing this time. Last time, back there with the wife, it didn't work that good when I was leaving. I just put that in for extra. I saw the ladies start to smile. Notice the lesson. If a person truly considers a situation, his anger might be relaxed because the facts of a case. Okay? The facts of a case. Sometimes we just like to get angry, don't we? Gideon never answered the question by the Ephraimites. The facts of the case turned out to be advantageous to Ephraim. Fortunately, notice point C, a horrible situation was diverted. When brethren are at odds, the organization is weakened and the enemy is what? Strengthened. Folks, this battle was not over. Okay? It's not over. And thank the Lord that it didn't explode internally, where Gideon now has to deal with this rather than being able to continue the battle. And we'll read about that next week. He's going to have some more problems with some bros. He has as many problems with his brethren as he does with the enemy. Unbelievable.